testosterone, we have a problem.
Hi, and welcome to this bonus episode of Outside the Manosphere. This is a bit more from a conversation we were having that just went too long, didn't have any relevance to the Manosphere, or both. Either way, here it is. Enjoy.
So last time we had a talk about the telepathy tapes and telepathy in general, and I told you I'd listen to the podcast, and so I have listened to the podcast, and I also went back and listened to Science Versus, which was the other podcast that's directly speaking to it, and I'm still not sold. For me, it comes down to, so I think Science Versus covered a lot of things really well, and I think there's some Occam's razors things for me, but what I do want to come, I don't want to just squash stuff, and especially things that people enjoy. So like one of the things that I was thinking about as I was listening to it is, especially for the kids that seem to really be enjoying themselves and laughing and having fun, and whether you believe in telepathy or not, what's really magical about what's going on to me is that people that have a very hard time communicating and engaging with other individuals have, there's something going on there where they can, and where the person, usually the mother, is also getting something profound out of it. So just like finding that connection, when those connections, especially with people with certain backgrounds, are can be really hard to make, is something that's really beautiful. Whether you believe in it or not, I think that's something valuable, and it's something that we're like, this whole show for us is about, that is reaching out to make connections. So I kind of wanted to, whether you believe in the telepathy or not, and I'm not there, but there is something, especially in those really positive situations where the kids are laughing and they seem really happy to be doing it. Regardless of what you think is going on, there's something really nice there. So that's kind of where I came down on it. And yeah, I just throw it back to you, I guess.
Well, so I did listen to Science Versus, that particular episode. I actually had a bunch of Science Versus podcast or episodes downloaded for like other things I wanted to listen to. I thought they did a very good job debunking it, and they didn't discount anything for me, really. And I know that, and there's a fear of mine because I've listened to okay, so specifically, I'm going to really try to keep this short. Specifically, I remember listening to a podcast on a son. It was like a 3-episode thing, and he was trying to reason with his father, who was like full blown QAnon, and like his wife was divorcing him. Like, it was really sad. Like, this guy just blew up his life and he alienated himself from everyone around him. But so he and his father had like a bet, like, okay, when this date comes and the storm doesn't occur and like Trump doesn't retake power and like all this QAnon stuff happens, he's like, will you accept that you were wrong? He's like, absolutely, absolutely. His father was so sure that he was right, that he was willing to be like, yeah, oh no, it was like a $10,000 bet. He's like, I'll give you $10,000. So he lost that bet.
Yeah.
And he like honored the bet. I guess he gave his son his money or whatever. And the son was like, so do you like, you admit that you were wrong? He's like, yes, I admit that I was wrong. But he had this whole explanation as to why there's this, there's that, and he was still not convinced. And he had another reason to like preserve his thought process, and I found that to be so sad. I think anybody listening to it would find that to be sad, because he wasn't talking to his daughter anymore. He wasn't talking to his wife anymore. It was just his son, who was like, they were avoiding this topic so that they could maintain a relationship, and it was just really sad. Anyway, so I'm hyper aware of that. And what I'm about to say is going to be almost identical to that sort of like kookery, and I get it. But so what I found with Science Versus on the subject of the telepathy tapes was, well, one, they did cherry pick a lot of stuff, because there's a lot of things that it was completely unexplainable, and they didn't address it at all. Did you listen to the full series or just the one episode?
No, I just listened to an episode or two.
Yeah. So there's a lot of it in there that it's just like they didn't address it in Science Versus. I would have been curious to find out what they had to say about that. And they were super dismissive of it, like kind of giggling, go, yeah, I'm not gonna listen to season 2. And I don't know, man, like I thought that was unfair. and they did reach out to the podcaster. They did reach out to, I
Mhm.
think, one of the parents in the thing, and the parent didn't respond. And the
Yeah.
podcaster said she was too busy working on the next season plus the
Yeah.
documentary she's working on. And I bet you she wasn't even too busy. I think they're just tired of like fielding skepticism and like I mean, case in point, you listened to the rebuttal before you even listened to the podcast, and so you went in there with this sort of aim to confirm the bias that you heard. You know what I mean? And I know that respect. It's a weird thing to accept, just
Yeah.
like out of nothing. But the fact that you listened to the rebuttal, you already went in there with your guns raised. You know what I mean? And not that's not to say you would have like embraced everything in the show anyway. I find some of it a little weird. But one thing in particular, the whole thing with and again, I'm not going to defend the whole podcast because I don't want to do that, and like people
Right.
should just listen to it if they want to. One of the things they said was like in every case where they had the like the spellers. So in the telepathy tapes, these autistic children can't communicate unless there's like a letter board. So it's
Yeah.
usually an acrylic board full of letters, and the kids point to each letter, and they spell out what they want to say. And the criticism is that the parents are giving them subtle cues, some like even unconsciously giving them subtle
Mhm.
cues and spelling it out instead of the children. Or because a lot of these children can't feel their own bodies, like the parent will
Right.
kind of ground them by touching their shoulder or the top
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
their
Yeah.
head or whatever. And the argument is like through that contact, they're relaying information that we just like the average person can't detect, but the children are able to in whatever way, just like the horse clicking its
Yeah.
feet.
Like pressure or whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Fair. I get all that. And like a major study that they were citing was that in one case where they were having not telepathy tapes, but the science verses, they were having the
Mhm.
children. They were showing the children a picture of like a shoe or something, and then they were showing a picture of like I don't know an ice cream cone or whatever to the parent or the facilitator,
Right.
and they were telling the children spell out what you see, and like 100% of the time the children were spelling out what the parents were saying. They'd spell ice cream
Mhm.
cone, not shoe, and they're like, I'm dusting my hands off, proving that this is some sort of
Right.
facilitator influence. And that premise, and based on that, they dismissed the whole thing. And I just disagree with that completely, and I'll explain in a second, but I just disagree with that conclusion.
Sure. The one thing that I would point out is that experiment that you're referencing wasn't about telepathy. It was about using those communication boards. And what they
Oh,
were showing was that without thinking about telepathy, just talking about them as communication boards, they weren't working as communication boards. So the only explanation around that is that it was telepathy, but that was nowhere in any part of their experiment.
right. But the whole premise of the telepathy tapes is they're using these boards in order to communicate. They're saying that the reason this kid was saying ice cream cone was because they were reading the mom's mind. So even though they didn't mention it in the study, like this, that's still they're trying to dismiss the spelling boards, but like I mean, how else are you gonna communicate? I mean, I think later on in the show they even say like people who can't who are deaf, they use sign language or they use like a
Mhm.
translator or
Yeah,
whatever. I mean, it's the same principle. It's just this person can't communicate at all and can
right.
easily be misread or misled or whatever
Yeah,
because how are they going to defend themselves really? But the one thing that I will say the reason a big reason why I'm primed to dismiss those conclusions, based on it being a telepathy and not just a flaw in the letterboard thing, is the reason I'm primed to dismiss that because and you're not is because every time I've done remote viewing, like say for example, there's the target that I'm trying to remote view and I'm completely blind to. I don't know what it is. Maybe the person who's targeted that thing for me is completely blind. They don't know what it is either. Let's say the thing that I'm trying to remote view, and again, that is when you're trying to see something in your mind's eye when there's no chance you can do it. You're trying to smell it, you're trying to taste it, you're trying to hear it, you're trying to describe it without having any possible way of doing that. So let's say this object is I don't know a croissant with a coffee and a slice of cheese at a bistro beneath the Eiffel Tower. Now, I don't give a shit about that breakfast. Like that's not an interesting thing to look at. So let's say if I'm doing this remote viewing thing, rather than describe the breakfast, I describe the Eiffel Tower. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because from time after time after time, when I do a remote viewing target, I describe what's interesting to me, and I don't describe the target. Like, and it's eerily there. Like, okay, yeah, I
Sure.
described the Eiffel Tower, but I'm supposed to be describing the breakfast directly beneath it. Like, what are the odds of that? You know what I'm saying? So, and that's and the reason this was even so scientific was because when this was developed by the U.S. military, they called that a miss. Like, if someone's describing the Eiffel Tower when they're supposed to be describing the breakfast, they say, "Yeah, you failed." They didn't even say like, "Oh yeah, this was statistically weird that you would say that." They're like, "Nope, fail, move on. We're not going to even acknowledge that. You need to describe the breakfast." And so it was pretty rigorous. And anyway, my point is that when I see that these kids are spelling the thing that the parents are looking at, I don't take it as, I mean, sure, it's possible that that every single parent and every single kid, every single parent is not only able to do that, every single one of these kids is able to read their parent in the same way. That's statistically weird. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And when I look at that happening, I look at it as like, no, these kids are just so connected to their parent that that's what they're picking up, and they don't give a shit about what they're looking at. They want to say what their parents are looking at. You know what I mean? So that's kind of how, and you can't argue that. There's no way you, from a materialistic perspective, there's absolutely no way you can argue that against me. And I'm not saying haha checkmate. I'm saying like it's there's no way for either of us to like win that discussion.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
But that's where I'm at with that.
Yeah, and I do think there are things that I could say. However, I'm not going to try and win. I'm very happy with your happiness in this subject, and I'm very happy with where I'm at in this subject, and I think that's fine. And you have had experiences outside of these things which are personal,
Sure.
and so for me, from a statistic, we're getting well far from shore here, but
Yeah.
but yeah, for me, statistically, like there's a bell curve of traits that a number of dimensions to everybody. Whether you're perceptive or all the D&D things, your constitution, whatever. But it's totally possible and probable even that there's some level of, whether you want to call it intuition or understanding of people, that you like some intuitive understanding of people, or telepathy, or whatever, that there are people that are really bad at this and there are people that are really, really excellent at
Yep.
this.
Yep.
And if you've had that experience, I can't discount it. Maybe you're one of those people that just picks up on all kinds of things. So I'm perfectly happy to leave it there.
Yeah. I have
Yeah.
one more thing to say. One more thing to say. One, I am not special, and I've realized that like not I've
You are
realized it.
so special,
Well, thank you.
Carlos.
You know what? Yeah, you're right. You're right. No, but really anybody can do the remote viewing stuff. You just have to like have discipline and all. And I know that because I got better and better and better the more I did it, and then I just haven't done it in so long. But anyway, anybody can do it. That's why I was always saying like, hey, give it a try. And
Yeah.
that's how the U.S. government like funded it for 20 something years, because when they were called to like prove it, they said, you know what, we're not going to prove it. You sit down, and then they would have these auditors do it, and they would do it, and they say, okay, yeah, this is something weird and it's working. Whatever it is, keep going. But
Yeah.
last thing, listening to Science Versus, I was sad when I finished hearing it, because I realized that it makes perfect sense. Their rebuttal made absolute sense, and they were very confident with it. And that's right. It makes perfect sense in a
Sure.
materialistic world. And I realized that I'm never going to convince you to be interested in this. You have to be impacted. So I'm just changing my approach to you, is all.
Well, I mean, I'm interested. I'd be willing to try some remote viewing or something like that. It's something that I would certainly need a guide for.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
but yeah, yeah. No, Science Versus is just a podcast I listen to regularly. So when it popped up, I wasn't going out of my way or anything. I just was like, oh, this is that thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So yeah, um,
Anyway, be prepared for like a sneak attack. You're not
yeah.
going to even,
All right.
you're not going to even realize. Suddenly, you're just going to be wearing crystals and lighting candles around the house.
Boot kick to my chakra. The thing that you're saying about rejecting these things out of hand, I think like you're absolutely right to say those things, because there's like the people that I listen to that I think are really wonderful scientists, And the people that I've met that I feel like are really wonderful scientists are the ones that just adore being surprised and being wrong. Like that's what you're looking for. That means like something that we thought was fundamental or true has been a mistake, and we get to completely realign our reality to closer to what it is. And that's what I think most good scientists are looking for. So yeah, the idea of like that pushback against rejecting things out of hand, I'm absolutely 100%
Right.
with you there.
Well, you know what's funny too? You just reminded me the in the scientific community, the ones that are most receptive to this kind of thing are like quantum physicists. And I meant to look up some stuff so I wouldn't sound like a bozo, but and so I won't go into detail. But like have you heard of so on a subatomic level, like things are weird. Are you very familiar with physics at all? I'm not, but I've
I love science. Yeah.
so well, yeah, me too. But physics, like like I said some time ago, I didn't finish high school. I even went on to college, but I
Sure.
took biology, microbiology, paleontology, micro or lots of sciences. But I never took a physics class, and I never took a chemistry class, which are like super interesting. But I just I have that hole in my brain. But what I understand is that quantum particles and waves and everything don't behave in any way like the model of macro physics. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
they're not affected by gravity. They're faster than light, or quote unquote faster than light. They can be in two places at once through what is it, quantum entanglement. Like they behave so strangely that I found that the people who are most receptive to like the woo in the science world are quantum physicists. And I'd cite specifically the double slit theory or experiment. Are you familiar with that?
I don't know the double slit. I know most of the other things that you were talking about. I know a bit about, but yeah, I don't know double slit.
Google it because real quickly, and I'm like I said, I'm not in any way qualified to bring this up, but the double slit experiment is when you have, or is it, they would send a photon or some kind of particle through like two parallel slits on a barrier, and they would go through and they'd splat on a or they go through the next wall. And
Yeah.
what they were doing is they were recording it, and you expect to see like a barrage of little dots where the
Hmm.
individual particles went through. But what they found was, I think it was more when they weren't recording it until it was not reacting the way they were expecting it to. Rather than seeing single dots where single particle went through, they were seeing like a wave pattern of like a wave going through two slits rather than just the one. You know what I mean? So it was like this weird
Sure.
disruption. And so they said, that's weird. Let's record this and see what's going on. And when they would record it, they wouldn't get the same pattern. They were only getting the little splats of the individual particles. So what they've, and I'm really simplifying this, but what they've determined was these particles, and this is not woo. This is established mystery. Like this is
Yeah.
unexplained. What they established was when these particles were being observed, they call it the observer effect. When they were being observed, they behaved a certain way, and when they were being unobserved, they behaved a different way. And they even
Mhm.
tried to like trick it. They'd say, "Okay, we'll record it after it goes through the slit, so
Right.
it can't change, and the pattern won't change." And they'd switch the cameras on after it's gone through the slit, and when as soon as they switch the cameras on, the result was the wave pattern again. So like there's even
Yeah.
like a temporal aspect to this whole thing where it's completely confounding, and nobody can explain it. And yeah, I'm not saying that's necessarily proof of anything, but it's just a completely inexplicable, confounding occurrence.
Yeah, it's very fascinating. Yeah, it's one of the fundamental things of systems is that observing them changes them. It's
Hmm.
really interesting. And on a macro level, it tends to also be true to some degree, but on the quantum level, it's very true. And there's lots of kinds of experiments about this, and lots of theories about how the idea of superposition is that like a particle or something can take on it can exist in multiple places at once, and it only actually kind of like snaps into place once someone's there to observe it.
Right,
And otherwise it kind of exists in this probabilistic realm where it's,
right.
it's in a bunch of different places. Yeah, and like the strange action at a distance is one of the other things that you were talking about, where
Hmm.
a particle doesn't exist in two places, but they're two particles can be connected
Right.
from very, very far distances, where one tells you everything you need, tells you information about the other because they're in some way. It's all very, very interesting stuff.
And when you act on the one, the other one responds in the exact same way. So I mean, they're essentially the same particle. It's just, or they're sharing the same space. I don't know.
Well, so they're connected. So like if one's turned up, the other one's turned down. So
Right.
they're not the same, but there's a connection there in the way that they interact affects even at far distances where
Right.
there's nothing else going on.
Like galactic distances. Like it doesn't
Yeah,
matter. It doesn't
yeah,
matter how close or how far. When you said at a macro level, it's the same thing. That's where the woo woo advocates claw that to their chest because like yeah okay you can change reality with your thoughts essentially, and you can change like physical matter and your health and all those things by concentrating on it,
sure.
and yeah, it's an interesting. You see where how it grows and changes into like something that's unsubstantiated. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like on a really basic level, which is far flung from where we were talking about. But like when I'm talking about like something I'm very familiar is when you observe like a classroom, the classroom changes
Hmm.
just because you're
Oh
there
sure,
observing it. So like that's one of the ways that I mean on the macro level
right.
is, and there's lots and lots of things that happen on kind of the macro level where just being there or just observing thing does change it. But that's like one solid example.
The other and I don't have a lot of details on it, but when Google released its information on the quantum computer or its quantum computing that it had announced, I don't know what, 5 months ago, 6 months ago, something like
Mhm,
that, last year. It was I don't know who said it, who one of the head honchos over there was saying this is proof of multiple dimensions
mhm.
because the amount of power that it was generating or that it required for the computations didn't exist in its processing. Like, there's no way that it could have done it that way. And I don't know, maybe he's just like falling on a easy answer, but they're saying yeah, and that makes perfect sense with superposition and quantum entanglement because if these like say electrons are existing in multiple universes, it's the same electron. It's just or as you were saying, it's at one acting on the other. It's
Yeah.
just pulling energy from another place, which I find absolutely fascinating and can tie that into manifesting and all kinds of ridiculousness.
Well, that sounds like the end of our first short.
Yeah, that's definitely not going to be in the show.
Anyways, I just wanted to mention it because I do think it's kind of important to to say like, yeah, if you're going into this, I mean, it's one of the ideas behind double blinds, and one of the fundamental things is like you're supposed to divorce yourself from an idea of how things are
Right.
supposed to end.
Well, and that's how a lot of those remote viewings go. They'll pick a target, and like let's say I'm giving you a target, you have no idea what it is, and this target was given to me by somebody else, and I don't even know who that person is necessarily. It's just here I assign a number to it and I give it to you, so we both don't know what it is. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
yeah, quite
and I
interesting.
mean that's how 11 works in Stranger Things. That's
Yeah,
what she was developed
that is, yeah, that's yeah.
for.
Don't make a mockery of this, Skip. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm connecting it to pop culture.
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
I have a theory that, and because Jess was saying the same thing about the the telepathy tapes not being, relevant to the manosphere, and I said, I do think about this kind of in the way that I think about like Mr. Rogers that we were talking a lot about
Hmm.
last week, which is part of this is just like, hey, we're two guys talking to each other, learning about each other.
Hmm.
We can disagree. We can model
Right.
how to do that as an adult male without being a being a d hole. And like I think that's there's value in that, and it doesn't need to be like all manosphere all the time. It can
Right.
be like it can just be like, hey, this is us developing our relationship
Yeah.
as well.
Well, then that's like I had fully intended to cut like the majority of it, and then when I was going through it, I was like, yeah, it's weird. I get it, and it's like it's fringe, and I'm aware of that. You know what I mean? I'm not like oblivious to that, but it's a huge part of like the way I think. And
Yeah,
if part of our objective is to get to know each other better, like um, it shouldn't be cut. You know what I mean? Or it shouldn't be like quietly shoot out because it's weird. You know
sure.
what I mean? Like it's
Yeah,
and let anybody listening think it's weird. Let them decide. Okay, yeah, he's the weird one, or he's the one that doesn't like think or whatever. I'm fine with that. It's a part of the how I do think. So
I can be the rigid jerk. And
Well, that's how I'm trying to edit you.
yeah,
So no.
yeah, good. Yeah. Jess listened to it, and she's like, it wasn't really about the Manosphere, but like it was fun to listen to it.
Yeah, and we talked about it, and we can move on.
Yeah.
And now if it's at least referenced, it's like, oh yeah, I understand what they're talking about.
Thanks for joining us. New podcasts every week. If any part of this show has resonated with you, let us know at outsidethemanosphere@gmail.com. We hope you'll come back. Enjoy your week.